A phone conversation between Chinese and US leaders over their country's trade war. High-speed train services delayed due to freezing weather on the mainland. And voters go to the polls in Bangladesh.
Good evening and welcome. President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump had a telephone conversation yesterday about a possible trade deal between the two countries. Trump called it a good call and said talks are progressing well. Alan Booknia reports.
Chinese state media confirmed the phone call, quoting Xi as saying that teams from both countries have been working to meet each other halfway. Trump tweeted, "Just had a long and very good call with President Xi of China. Deal is moving along very well. If made, it will be comprehensive. Big progress is being made." The two leaders agreed on December 1st to postpone more tariff hikes for 3 months to allow for negotiations. The world's two biggest economies have already slapped tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods in a battle that threatens to depress global trade. World stock markets have taken a beating recently, in part because of the U.S.-China trade war. The two countries are working towards holding face-to-face talks sometime next month. The U.S. wants China to address intellectual property theft and other aggressive measures that have driven Beijing's efforts to supplant U.S. technological dominance. Also at play is a threat by Trump to ban all Huawei and ZTE parts from U.S. equipment. The White House alleges China's two biggest telecoms companies work at the behest of Beijing, and their equipment could be used to spy on Americans. Huawei's chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou, remains in custody in Canada at the request of U.S. authorities, who are seeking to extradite her. Trump has said he could intervene if it helps the trade talks. In Beijing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kang also sounded a positive note today. He said that after 40 years of development, Sino-U.S. ties are at a historic new starting point, referring to the period since the two nations established diplomatic relations. U.S. news reports earlier this week said Beijing is planning to replace its Made in China 2025 initiative with a new program promising greater access for foreign companies. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
As a cold snap hits the city, people are urged to bundle up for the next few days. Up until 5 p.m, public hospitals had received 6 hypothermia patients, and one of them subsequently died. As Haley Joe reports, the cold weather also prevailed in some mainland cities, causing delays to some high-speed train services.
The temperatures in the city hit record lows today. While temperatures in most areas in the New Territories plummeted to single digits, it was slightly above 10 degrees in Chim Sa Choi this morning. The observatory says the cold and windy weather will stick around for the next few days. Even so, people weren't deterred from making train trips home ahead of New Year's Day, but some high-speed trains were. Around noon, the MTR Corporation announced a worse weather in some mainland cities were causing delays for some high-speed trains going to and from Hong Kong. So far, 8 trains have been affected, departing from or heading to Beijing Xi, Shanghai Hongqiao, Changsha Nan, or Kunming Nan. Very disappointed and feeling anxious, said this passenger who was in a rush to attend her brother's funeral. She said she definitely didn't feel good, saying that she could have gone home in just 5 hours, but with the delay, that's not possible. Over in Beijing, the weather has been unusually cold. Temperatures today fell to below -10 in the morning with a high of -2 degrees. For the Chinese capital, it's more common to range between near -6 and 4 degrees at this time of the year. Temperatures are expected to bounce back to normal levels early next week, according to forecasters. Back to Hong Kong, the MTR Corporation announced passengers coming from Shenzhen Bay and Guangzhou Nan to the city to consider taking other trains. Those whose trains are affected can check the updated schedules at the West Kowloon station or by calling the customer service hotline. Haley Joe, TVB News.
Overseas, and people in Bangladesh are voting in the country's first fully competitive general election in a decade. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has cast her ballot in Dhaka and is seeking a third straight term in power. She's being challenged by former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia, who's in jail after being convicted of corruption. The leader of the opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party says the charges were politically motivated. In her absence, opposition parties formed a coalition led by Kamal Hossain. The 82-year-old Oxford-educated lawyer was formerly a member of Hasina's Awami League party. The election campaign has been marred by the arrests and jailing of what the opposition says are thousands of Hasina opponents. Top Russian and Turkish officials met in Moscow to discuss the situation in Syria as U.S. forces prepare to withdraw from the area. The meeting came as Ankara said it plans to launch a military strike against U.S.-backed Kurdish militia in the country. Peter Koveas has details.
The meeting in Moscow discussed coordinating Russian and Turkish forces in Syria. The plan has changed now that the U.S. will be removing its forces from the country. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Russia and Turkey have reached an understanding under the new circumstances, and Moscow and Ankara have a common goal of clearing Syria of all terror organizations. Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said his country will be in close cooperation with Iran and Russia on Syria and regional issues. Among those could be the Kurdish stronghold of Manbij. Manbij, which U.S.-backed forces captured from Islamic State in 2016, has emerged as a focal point of new tensions after Donald Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. forces. The Syrian military said they have now entered the region as part of an apparent agreement with Kurdish fighters. After that announcement, Turkey-backed Syrian rebels said they started moving with Turkish forces toward the city in preparation for military operations. A member of the Turkey-backed Syrian rebel group says his forces are gathered near the front lines and are willing to enter the battle. A representative for Syrian Kurds in the Kurdistan region of Iraq also reacted to news about Manbij. He said if Turkish forces enter the city, they will likely commit war crimes there, like they did during previous invasions of other parts of Syria. U.S. forces have been patrolling Manbij and have bases there to prevent friction with Turkey-backed fighters. The Kurdish representative also said it's important for the coalition forces to stay longer and provide protection. The Kurds will now need new allies to protect them against the threatened Turkish offensive as U.S. forces prepare to withdraw from the region. Peter Koveas, TVB News.
U.S. President Donald Trump is blaming Democrats for the deaths of 2 migrant children in the last month. Trump tweeted that any deaths at the border are because of the Democrats' pathetic immigration policies. He also said the children were already sick when they were given over to Border Patrol. Both passed initial health screenings by border officials. 8-year-old Felipe Gomez Alonso of Guatemala died Monday. He was diagnosed with a common cold despite having a fever of 103 degrees. He later fell very sick and was readmitted to hospital where he died just before midnight. A 7-year-old migrant girl died earlier in the month.
A long-delayed presidential election in the Democratic Republic of Congo got underway in what is supposed to be the country's first Democrat transfer of power. President Joseph Kabila cast his ballot in the capital, Kinshasa. In power since his father's assassination in 2001, he is due to step down after the vote. It's considered a milestone in a country plagued by authoritarian rule, coups and civil war since gaining independence from Belgium in 1960. Critics, however, say the vote will be tarnished by fraud and Kabila could continue to rule from the sidelines. Voting in some Ebola-stricken areas was cancelled. Those areas are seen as favouring the opposition parties.
Still ahead in tonight's news. A former transport chief says he's disappointed at shoddy work at the Hong Hom Station extension. The Shichu Center in West Kowloon has its soft opening. And in Madrid, a hairstylist puts traditional cuts to the sword.
做每件事都有代價，你聽咗幾多嘢，就肯定要還返更多。吸食可卡因同冰毒，呢一刻好嗨，以為減到壓，話咁快就乜都冇晒，剔到上癮，冇咗人生，值得咩？打186-186，發短信去 WhatsApp、微信98-186-186，企硬唔剔嘢。做每件事都有代價，你聽咗幾多嘢，就肯定要還返更多。吸食可卡因同冰毒，呢一刻好嗨，以為減到壓，話咁快就乜都冇晒，剔到上癮，冇咗人生，值得咩？打186-186，發短信去 WhatsApp、微信98-186-186，企硬唔剔嘢。
Welcome back to TVB News. An academic who was formerly the city's transport and housing chief has expressed disappointment at shoddy work in the Sha Tin to Central Link project. Test results from random sample checks at Hong Hom Station of the new railway line continue to show procedures below the government's safety standards. You'll recognise Anthony Chung, who served 5 years as the city's transport and housing chief until last year.
In even the time when I was secretary, we used to say that quality must come first. Hong Kong has been known for good quality in construction.
So even now?
Well, that's why I said earlier I feel a bit disappointed that we are now facing those problems.
Problems on the Sha Tin to Central Link. Recent tests revealed steel bars that weren't fully screwed into couplers, fueling concerns about safety and project supervision.
So ultimately, for the Sha Tin Central Link, the MTR Corporation, it is the project manager. So of course, the primary responsibility rests with the MTR. When I was secretary, I did not receive any indication or report about those problems that we are now talking about. The main concern was about the duration of the project rather than the quality of the project.
He said he'll leave it to the experts to judge whether the Hong Hom Station extension needs to be demolished and rebuilt from scratch. For now, he's on a mission to lift standards at the city's self-financing post-secondary education institutions. One of 13 recommendations he submitted to the government last week is about the need to update an ordinance on higher education.
Even under the current CAP 320, the post-secondary colleges ordinance, there is a provision for deregistration. But the benchmarks, the criteria to be adopted are not spelled out. So we think that there should be a more transparent, accountable mechanism.
Other ideas proposed include getting government-funded universities to detach their self-financing tertiary institutions. In an age where branding matters, Chung said it's really up to the universities to decide if they still wish to be linked to their other branches by name. A new call on the government today to relax the number of non-local students allowed at the city's tertiary education institutions. This as the number of local secondary school leavers is projected to fall in the coming years. Peter Yuen, chairman of the Federation for Self-Financing Tertiary Education, played up the benefits of expanding the non-local student pool. Currently, institutions funded by the University Grants Committee can admit non-local students of up to 20% of their approved student numbers. As for tighter rules to govern self-financing post-secondary schools, Yuen said a low student intake shouldn't be the only factor to decide if the school should be deregistered, rather how teaching quality suffered given low student numbers.
Some district councillors say they have the answer to restoring peace in To Kwa Wan and Hong Kong. This, as residents there spoke recently out against mainland tour groups frequenting the districts. Pinky Wong has more.
Mainland tourists seen and heard as busloads of them are driven to To Kwa Wan and Hong Kong. The areas have become unlikely attractions filled with shops for tourists and a pier for harbor cruises. Up to 10,000 mainland tourists take the cruise daily. Half of them get on the cruise boats at Kowloon City Ferry Pier in To Kwa Wan. That puts the Kai Tak cruise terminal to shame, as it has remained rather quiet since it came into operation 5 years ago. Even the audit report said the terminal underperformed. Commenting on the suggestions by some district councillors, tourism sector lawmaker Yu Si Wing thinks it would be great for the Kai Tak cruise terminal to offer shops at low rent to vendors who cater to mainland tour groups. Yet he thinks it might be tough for the government to interfere in commercial businesses. While the government welcomes harbor cruise operators to berth at Kai Tak, others aren't so sure. Timothy Choi, Executive Director of the Hong Kong Tourism Association, worries that Kai Tak will be overcrowded with tourists as more residential developments spring up in the area. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
Dozens of Indonesians gathered this afternoon to pray for tsunami victims back home. Some of those at Victoria Park are domestic helpers working in Hong Kong. One woman so far received no news on her son, who lives with her ex-husband in an area affected by the tsunami. More than 430 deaths have been confirmed after a tsunami hit the coastlines of the Sunda Strait between the islands of Java and Sumatra more than a week ago.
A children's organisation remains disappointed in the government's inability to alleviate poverty. The Civil Children's Ombudsman today called for more public and transitional housing for the needy. Housing concerns top the group's list for the 9th year. That's a conclusion after getting 2,800 of its members to vote, including underprivileged children. They say the government also performed poorly in granting family reunions for new immigrants and eliminating discrimination against them. Overall, they gave the current administration 23 points out of 100. And a soft opening today at the Xi Chu Center in the West Kowloon Cultural District. It's billed as a world-class venue dedicated to promoting the rich heritage of Chinese opera. Lion dancing as part of the stage dedication ceremony. It's a tradition performers undertake at brand new venues. Henry Tang, chairman of the board of the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority, shared visions of bringing over 360 variations of Chinese opera to the center. And Lisa Wang expressed her excitement over the soft opening of Xi Chu Center. The chairwoman of the Chinese Artists Association of Hong Kong called the center's rental conditions harsh for local performers. 2 shows were performed today, and those who have pre-registered can also tour around the building before it officially opens to the public on the 20th of next month. Overseas again, Russian President Vladimir Putin took time away from playing the political game to play in one of his country's favorite sports. The Russian leader suited up to participate in a game of hockey in Moscow's Red Square. The game was held at a rink near the Kremlin. The exhibition was part of the Amateur Night Hockey League Putin co-founded in 2011 with some famous Russian players. The Russian leader did score a goal. He may have also scored some political points speaking to other competitors after the game. Putin usually plays in at least one public hockey game a year. And we take you to Spain to look at one of the most unique hairstylists in the business. Madrid-based Alberto Olmedo uses swords, metal claws and flame to give that perfect cut. The 54-year-old has been cutting hair for 30 years. He said he became disillusioned with the traditional way of using scissors because it wasn't giving him the right vertical cut and layers he wanted to create. His clients say they are delighted with the results. And that's the news.